There are approximately 650,000 people in the United States living without permanent shelter on any given night. No power grid, no running water, no food delivery, no temperature regulation, no security guarantee. Every single one of them woke up this morning and saw the exact problems that you would face if the grid went down tomorrow, if the supply chain collapsed, if urban warfare arrived at the outskirts of your city, if everything you've been told to buy and stockpile suddenly became irrelevant because the stores are closed, the roads are blocked, and the infrastructure that your entire survival plan depends on has simply ceased to function. The uncomfortable truth is this. The most operationally prepared human beings on the planet right now are not preppers. They are not veterans. They are not YouTube survivalists with sponsored gear reviews. They are the people your city has decided to make invisible. And what they know, what they have been forced to learn through daily survival at absolute resource zero, is more immediately applicable to a WW3 collapse scenario than anything you'll find in a tactical backpack catalog. This is not a feel-good video about homelessness. This is a skills transfer. 10 of them. And by the end, you will either be genuinely better prepared for what is coming, or you'll realize that every dollar you spent on preparedness gear so far has been buying comfort, not survival capacity. Drop ready or not ready in the comments right now, because skill number 8 is the one that most preppers skip entirely, and it is the one that actually determines whether you make it past week 2. Skill number 1, urban shelter assessment. Not finding a house. You already know how to find a house. The grid down scenario doesn't give you a house. It gives you a city that is partially destroyed, partially abandoned, structurally unpredictable, and occupied by people with competing needs. What most people do when they imagine finding emergency shelter is they look for something that looks safe, intact walls, a recognizable building, somewhere that feels like a structure they would normally enter. This instinct kills. Structurally intact facades can conceal catastrophically compromised load-bearing elements. A building with its front wall standing might have a collapsed interior from a blast, a fire, or years of deferred maintenance. It looks like shelter. It is a trap. The homeless community has developed a rapid assessment protocol that most people have never been taught because most people have never needed it. Before entering any unknown structure, the check is multi-sensory and takes under 90 seconds. First, smell. The scent of ammonia or sulfur inside an enclosed structure indicates chemical presence, gas leak, or biological decomposition at scale. Get out. Second, sound. Step just inside the threshold and stop. A structure under active stress produces specific sounds: low creaking under no wind load, intermittent cracking from shifting weight, water movement in side walls. Any of these signals that the structure is still settling or failing. Third, floor flex. Take 3 steps inside and assess flex and sound underfoot. Soft flex combined with dark discoloration of visible flooring material indicates rot, water damage, or fire-weakened subflooring. A floor that yields underfoot in an otherwise intact-looking room has failed structurally and will not support sustained weight. Fourth, sight lines. Look for the 3 structural tells that signal a building is beyond salvageable as shelter: V-shaped cracks running from door or window corners, diagonal cracking across load-bearing walls that indicates foundation shift, and visible daylight between the wall and ceiling junction that should be sealed. Any of these means you move on. The multiplier here is significant. This same assessment protocol applies to choosing a shelter from chemical exposure, from flood risk, from hostile occupant detection, and from rapid tactical egress planning. 1 skill for survival applications. Skill number 2, fire without tools. Not a lighter, not a ferro rod, nothing purchased. Because in the scenario being discussed, urban conflict, supply chain collapse, extended grid down, the lighter runs out of fuel, the ferro rod gets lost to the pack, and the matches got wet. What most people do is carry redundant ignition tools and call it prepared. The problem nobody tells you is that ignition tools require dry tinder to function, and in an urban environment during a WW3 scenario, you're surrounded by concrete, metal, and glass, materials with essentially no organic fuel value. The homeless community's answer fire is not a technique. It is a foraging mentality. Before ignition, fuel architecture matters more than the ignition method. Urban environments contain petroleum-based tinder sources that burn even when damp. Food packaging liner, fast food containers, synthetic fabric scraps, rubber insulation stripped from wire, candle remnants from restaurants and churches. These materials have significantly lower ignition temperatures than organic tinder and sustain flame even in wet conditions due to their petroleum hydrocarbon content. The ignition method for zero-tool scenarios uses a lens principle, broken glass, a clear plastic water bottle filled with water, acting as a convex lens, or the parabolic inside surface of a polished metal bottom focused on a dark carbon point of tinder. This is not folklore. It is applied optics. A convex lens of sufficient curvature will focus sunlight to a point temperature above 450 degrees Fahrenheit, the ignition threshold of most organic material. No tools, no purchase, no failure point from a dead battery or soak match. The multiplier for fire in an urban collapse scenario extends beyond warmth. Water purification through boiling, infection prevention through instrument sterilization, signaling food safety and psychological stability, because humans neurologically have a documented reduction in cortisol levels when seated before an open flame. Fire is not luxury in a collapse. It is medicine. But fire means nothing if you are visibly announcing your location to people who would take everything you have. Which brings us to skill number 3, and to the most counterintuitive piece of information in this entire video. Pause here. 2 skills have been covered: urban shelter assessment and zero-tool fire, and most people watching survival content stop engaging right around this point, before the information compounds into something they can actually use as a system rather than a list. Comment, still here, if you're committed to finishing this. Because skill number 7 is the one that emergency medicine professionals do not want widely distributed, and it is the one that determines whether an infected wound kills you slowly over 2 weeks or whether you handle it with items available in any abandoned pharmacy. Still here? Keep going. Skill number 3, urban water sourcing and improvised purification. The default prep advice is to store water, 1 gallon per person per day, minimum 2 weeks. Fine advice for a short-term disruption. Completely useless as a strategy for a sustained grid-down scenario, because stored water is finite, and the infrastructure that delivers water to a city runs on electricity. When the grid fails, pumping stations stop within hours. Municipal water pressure drops to 0 within 12 to 48 hours in most systems. The water you stored runs out. Then what? Most preppers know about rivers and rain collection. The homeless community has a more granular understanding of where water actually exists in an urban environment. Building water towers, passive gravity systems installed on commercial and residential buildings in dense urban areas, retain significant water volume after grid failure because they do not depend on pump pressure. They drain through gravity. A water tower on an 8-story building in any American city holds between 10,000 and 50,000 gallons of water at any given time, and continues to provide gravity-fed water flow to the floors below after power fails. This is not classified information. It is mechanical engineering that nobody has connected to civilian emergency water access. Beyond towers, decorative water features in urban plazas, fountains, reflecting pools, landscape irrigation reservoirs, accumulate and hold water that, while not potable in its raw state, is treatable. The purification protocol available at Resource Zero is a combination method, solar disinfection, or SODIs, combined with improvised activated charcoal filtration. SODIs is validated by the World Health Organization and requires only a clear plastic or glass container and 6 hours of direct sunlight. The UVA radiation in sunlight at wavelengths between 320 and 400 nanometers disrupts the DNA replication of bacteria and protozoa, rendering them non-viable. Activated charcoal for filtration is produced from any organic material burned to char in a low-oxygen environment, a covered metal container in a fire, and then cooled and crushed. The carbon surface area of activated charcoal is, at the microscopic level, enormous. 1 gram has a surface area of approximately 500 to 1,500 square meters. This surface area absorbs heavy metals, chlorine byproducts, and organic chemical compounds that UV disinfection alone does not address. Together, SODIs plus activated charcoal filtration produces water that the WHO classifies as safe for consumption in field conditions. No filter purchase. No tablets. No power. Skill number 4. Caloric foraging in a stripped urban environment. The prepper model is stockpile calories. The collapse model is food access at zero stock, because your stockpile is a target, a fixed point, and a finite resource. What keeps a person alive in a genuinely resource-stripped urban environment over the medium term, the weeks that follow the initial acute phase, is caloric intelligence, not caloric inventory. The mistake most people make is assuming that a collapsed urban environment contains no food. Wrong. Dead wrong. Grocery stores are looted within 72 hours. That is true, but grocery stores are not what food is. Commercial restaurant supply warehouses hold months of inventory in non-perishable form. Bulk rice, dried legumes, sugar, salt, vegetable oil are almost never on the civilian looting map because they are not visually identifiable as food sources from the street. They look like industrial buildings. Hotel kitchens contain walk-in dry storage with professional-grade inventory. Veterinary supply distributors carry pharmaceutical-grade dextrose and saline. School district central kitchens, the massive non-retail food preparation facilities that serve entire school systems, are stocked with USDA commodity foods in bulk packaging specifically designed for long-term storage. The caloric density knowledge that matters here is the legume-grain combination principle. 200 grams of dried lentils plus 200 grams of any grain provides a complete amino acid protein profile through complementary amino acid pairing. Lysine-rich legumes complementing the methionine-rich grain. 400 grams of this combination provides approximately 1,400 kilocalories and 40 grams of protein. This is not a delicious meal. It is a survival platform, and both ingredients store at room temperature, require only water and fire to prepare, and are available in bulk in every commercial food warehouse in every city in the world. Skill number 5, thermal management without gear. The sleeping bag, the thermal base layer, the heated tent, all irrelevant at resource zero. Hypothermia kills faster than dehydration, faster than starvation. Core temperature drop below 95 degrees Fahrenheit triggers progressive cognitive impairment, motor dysfunction, and cardiac arrhythmia. The homeless community's thermal management system is not gear-based. It is layer architecture and microclimate selection. The layering principle in zero-gear conditions uses whatever textile material is available: newspaper, cardboard, plastic sheeting, discarded fabric, in a specific order. The principle is dead air space. Thermal retention is not about the material itself. It is about the air trapped within and between layers. Still air has a thermal conductivity of approximately 0.024 watts per meter Kelvin, lower than any commercially available insulation material except aerogel. Multiple loose layers of any material trap dead air between them and create a thermal barrier that reduces conductive heat loss from the body dramatically. The second component is microclimate selection. Buildings retain heat in their interior cores after the exterior ambient temperature drops. The lowest floor above ground level in the center of a building, away from all exterior walls, has the highest thermal mass and the lowest convective air movement. These locations hold temperature significantly longer than exterior rooms, attics, or exposed upper floors. Combined with a radiant barrier, any reflective material like emergency foil, aluminum foil from food packaging, or mirror glass position between your body and the direction of the wind source, convective and radiative heat loss drops to near zero in a sealed interior space. This is the same physics used by NASA in spacecraft thermal insulation, available for free in any abandoned building. What most people don't realize is that thermal management and caloric intake are directly linked at the physiological level. Your body burns calories to generate heat, and when your calorie supply drops, your ability to maintain core temperature drops with it, which means Skill 4 and Skill 5 operate as a system, not a list. And both of them mean nothing if you are visible to people who want what you have, which is exactly what skill number 6 addresses. What is about to be said here will make some people uncomfortable, and it should, because it challenges something that almost every preparedness community has built its identity around: the idea that being visibly prepared, visibly armed, visibly equipped, and visibly organized is a deterrent to threat. It is not. In a resource-depleted urban environment, visible preparation is a targeting beacon. Comment controversial. Right now, if you think the survival community has this completely backwards, because the data from every documented urban conflict in the last 50 years says the same thing. The people who survive are not the most visibly formidable. They are the most invisible. Skill number 6. Invisibility and threat profile reduction. The homeless community has developed a sophisticated, if entirely unconscious, understanding of social camouflage that is directly applicable to grid-down urban survival. The principle is called threat profile management, and it works on 2 levels. The first level is physical presentation. In a post-collapse urban environment, the human brain's threat assessment system, operating under stress and resource scarcity, categorizes people rapidly into 2 groups: those who have something worth taking and those who don't. Clean clothes, organized gear, full packs, and healthy body weight signal resource-rich status. Damaged clothes, smaller load, indirect movement patterns, and avoidance of main thoroughfares signal resource-poor status. The objective is to signal the second while being the first. This means distributing resources across the body in non-obvious ways, using worn or darkened outer layers to cover better material underneath, and moving at the pace and pattern of the environment rather than at a pace that signals purpose and direction. The second level is behavioral. Most people under stress move with visible urgency, fast pace, frequent direction checks, eye contact, response to sounds. These behavioral signals are readable from a distance and mark a person as both alert to threat and potentially carrying something worth the risk. The homeless survival pattern is the opposite: deliberate, unhurried movement, peripheral awareness rather than direct scanning, and route selection based on low traffic paths rather than efficient paths. In a city under civil breakdown, efficiency is a threat multiplier. Invisibility is armor. Skill number 7. Medical self-treatment without clinical access. This is a skill that emergency medicine professionals have been vocal about not wanting widely distributed. Not because the information is dangerous in itself, but because self-treatment without training leads to misapplication. That caveat stands. But in a WW3 scenario where hospitals are overloaded, pharmacies are stripped, and the nearest trained clinician is 2 days away, the alternative to imperfect self-treatment is untreated infection. Infection in a resource-compromised body, one that is already calorie deficient, dehydrated, and under sustained cortisol stress, progresses to sepsis at an accelerated rate compared to a healthy baseline. Sepsis kills within 24 to 72 hours without intervention. The intervention available at Resource Zero follows a priority sequence that the unhoused medical community, the informal network of harm reduction knowledge passed between people who cannot access standard health care, has been refining for decades. Priority 1 is wound closure and contamination prevention. Irrigation is more important than closure. A wound irrigated with clean water under pressure, using a syringe, a punctured plastic bag, or water squeezed from any container through a small opening, removes 80% of bacterial contamination by mechanical action alone. Closure before irrigation traps contamination. This is a mistake that kills. Clean first, close second. Priority 2 is improvised antimicrobial application. Honey, specifically raw, unprocessed honey, has documented bacteriostatic and bactericidal properties validated in peer-reviewed literature. The mechanism is dual. High osmotic pressure from its sugar concentration draws water out of bacterial cells, and hydrogen peroxide, released by the glucose oxidase enzyme in honey, creates a sustained low-level antimicrobial environment. Manuka honey at UMF 10+ is a clinical standard, but any raw honey provides partial efficacy. Applied to a sealed wound, it reduces infection progression significantly compared to an untreated wound. Priority 3 is fever management. Willow bark, available in any environment where willows grow, which includes most urban waterways, parks, and drainage channels, contains salicin, the biochemical precursor to aspirin. Salicylic acid, the active metabolite of salicin, inhibits prostaglandin synthesis at COX-1 and COX-2 sites, the same mechanism of action as aspirin. A tea brewed from willow bark provides documented fever-reducing and anti-inflammatory effect. This is not folk medicine. Aspirin was synthesized by identifying and isolating the active compound from willow bark in 1853. The plant version is less concentrated and slower acting, but it is real and it is available. Skill number 8. Building a micro-tribe. This is a skill that most solo preppers have intellectually acknowledged and emotionally refused. Because the fantasy of self-sufficient individual survival is deeply satisfying and almost entirely fictional. The documented survival data from every extended urban conflict, Leningrad, Sarajevo, Mosul, the LA riots, shows the same pattern without exception. Individuals who survived beyond the first 2 weeks were operating within small, trust-bound groups with defined roles and shared resources. The homeless community's approach to group formation under hostile conditions is not idealistic. It is brutally pragmatic. The trust assessment protocol is observational, not verbal. You do not ask someone if they can be trusted. You watch how they behave when they think no one important is watching, how they treat people they have no reason to impress, how they respond to resource scarcity within the group, whether their stated capabilities match their demonstrated ones. 3 to 7 people is a functional micro-tribe size, large enough to allow role specialization and watch rotation, small enough to move cohesively and make decisions without consensus paralysis. Role specialization in a grid-down group follows skill-based allocation. Medical knowledge holder, fire and water management, route scouting and threat assessment, psychological stabilization. That last role is not soft. It is operational. Groups under sustained stress without a stabilizing communicator fracture predictably at the 2 to 3 week mark, and fracture in hostile environments means the end of everyone's survival margin. Remember the caloric intelligence discussed in Skill 4? Here is where it becomes critical. Because a microtribe's caloric pooling capacity multiplies each individual's survival window by the square of the group size, not linearly. One person foraging alone finds what one person can carry. A 3-person foraging rotation, with one person maintaining shelter and security, produces a caloric surplus that begins to enable the kind of forward planning that separates 30-day survivors from 6-month survivors. The tribe is not a nice-to-have. It is the mechanism. But none of that group function is possible if the group falls apart psychologically before the resources run out. And that, the part nobody in the preparedness community talks about with any honesty, is exactly what skill number 9 addresses. There is a documented psychological phenomenon called the 72-hour emotional crash. It appears in disaster survivor accounts with enough consistency that FEMA's own psychological first aid training acknowledges it, though they don't publicize the mechanism. In the first 72 hours of a genuine crisis, the human nervous system operates in a state of productive emergency arousal. Cortisol and adrenaline suppress emotional processing, sharpen physical response, and create a state that functions well for short-term survival action. People do impressive things in the first 3 days of a crisis. They rescue people. They make critical decisions correctly. They function without sleep. Then, at approximately the 72-hour mark, the neurochemical buffer depletes. Cortisol drops. The suppressed emotional processing resurfaces all at once. And the person who was functional for 3 days suddenly cannot stop crying, cannot make decisions, cannot motivate. In a group survival context, this is contagious. One person in emotional collapse exerts a downward pull on every other member. And in a hostile environment, cognitive collapse at the individual level can mean physical danger for the entire group within hours. Skill number 9, psychological resilience and the discipline of imposed routine. The homeless community's understanding of this is not theoretical. It is earned through daily confrontation with circumstances that are psychologically identical to wartime civilian survival: chronic uncertainty, physical threat, social isolation, loss of identity, resource scarcity, and no clear timeline for resolution. The coping mechanism that consistently separates long-term survivors in this population from those who deteriorate is not optimism. It is not spiritual faith, though that helps. It is routine. Deliberately imposed, non-negotiable routine in the absence of any external structure. The psychological function of routine under chaos is neurologically specific. It activates the basal ganglia habit circuits, which operate below the prefrontal cortex, and therefore remain functional even when executive function is compromised by stress. In practical terms, a person with a fixed morning protocol, wake at a consistent time, perform a specific hygiene action, however minimal, complete a defined task before engaging with external environment, maintains functional decision-making capacity significantly longer than a person operating in pure reactive mode. The military has known this for centuries. Every military in history imposes rigid routine and training not for discipline in the traditional sense, but to build a neurological habit infrastructure that keeps soldiers operational when their prefrontal cortex is overwhelmed by fear. The homeless community arrived at the same protocol independently and for the same reason. The imposing a structure on an unstructured environment is not a luxury response to crisis. It is the biological mechanism that keeps the decision-making architecture online when everything else is offline. Skill number 10, negotiation and the barter economy. When currency fails, and currency fails in every extended wartime or grid-down scenario, not theoretically but historically and without exception, the economy does not disappear. It reverts. It reverts to the exchange of goods and skills with direct utility. And the people who understand how that economy actually works at the transactional level have an advantage that no stockpile can replicate. Here is what most people get wrong about barter. They assume it is an exchange of equivalent physical goods. I have canned beans, you have antibiotics, we trade. That model is simplistic and, more importantly, limited. Real barter economics, the kind that sustains communities through years of conflict, as documented in the Sarajevo siege economy of 1992 to 1995 and the Venezuelan hyperinflationary collapse of 2015 to 2020, is built on skill-based exchange, not goods-based exchange. Because goods run out, skills do not. The most valuable currency in a post-collapse urban environment is not gold, not ammunition, and not food in bulk, though all three have value. It is the ability to do something that others cannot. Medical knowledge, fire management, water purification, mechanical repair, social mediation. The person who can reliably provide one of these services to a community becomes economically indispensable in a way that transforms their security position entirely. They are no longer a target for resource extraction. They are a node in a network that needs them alive and functioning. This is a protection model that the homeless community understands intimately, because visibility without utility is dangerous. But demonstrated utility creates social insurance in the absence of institutional protection. The multiplier here is profound. Every skill in this video is simultaneously a survival tool and a barter asset. Urban shelter assessment keeps you alive and makes you the person a group needs alive. Improvised medical knowledge keeps you healthy and makes you irreplaceable. Water purification feeds your own needs and gives you something to trade. The skills are not individual tools. They are a compounding economic position that appreciates in value as the crisis extends. And this is a reframe that the preparedness industry will never tell you, because the preparedness industry sells products. This reframe sells nothing. Skills are free. Skills are weightless. Skills cannot be looted from your dead hands. Here is the honest reality check that finishes this. Nothing in these 10 skills guarantees survival. WW3, if it arrives as a civilizational event, will produce circumstances that no protocol survives. This is not pessimism. It is probability math. What these skills do is shift the probability distribution. They turn a person who is operating on assumptions and products into a person operating on knowledge and adaptability. That is the only edge that matters when the circumstances are genuinely unpredictable. You now know more about functional grid-down urban survival than the vast majority of people who consider themselves prepared. Not because this information is a secret. It isn't. Because most people have never been willing to look at the people already living it and ask what they actually know. One honest question before the final minute. What is the one skill from this video that you are committing to actually practice this week? Not research, not watch more videos. Practice. Comment it below with specifics. Which skill, what action, what day? The act of writing a specific commitment publicly doubles the probability of follow-through. And what's read in these comments genuinely shapes the next video. Think something was wrong here. A skill that doesn't hold up, a claim that doesn't check out, a better method from real field experience? Drop the challenge. Best sourced, most specific critique gets pinned with a direct response. If this shifted how the preparedness question is being thought about, share it with one person who believes expensive gear is the answer, not for algorithmic reasons, because that belief, when it gets tested by real collapse conditions, is going to fail them, and a 3-minute conversation now might prevent that. Stay adaptable, stay skilled, or stay dependent on a system that will not stay intact. The choice is already being made by what the viewer does next. One more thing. The progress bar still is content. 99% of people have already left. The 1% who stayed get the skill that wasn't on the list, the one that operates under all 10 of the others, and is the reason some people survive extended chaos without any of the skills above, and others fail despite having all of them. It is called environmental reading, the ability to extract accurate situational intelligence from the physical and social environment without any access to news, communication, or official information. The homeless community practices this every single day. The sound profile of a neighborhood at specific times of day tells a trained reader whether normal activity is present, suppressed, or absent, and absent of normal sound is frequently the first signal of incoming threat, days before it arrives. Smoke columns in an urban environment, analyzed by color, density, and direction, tell a reader whether a fire is structural, vehicular, chemical, or agricultural, and which direction the threat is moving. Human traffic patterns, where people are moving at what speed with what load, carry information about the security and resource state of areas ahead of your current position. These are not skills that require training courses. They require deliberate attention to an environment that most people move through without observation. Start now, in your own neighborhood, on your own commute. Begin reading the environment instead of your phone, because the environment was always telling you everything. You just weren't listening. Comment the word observer if you found this ending. Welcome to the people who actually pay attention.